All right, it's laser time. Okay, so I've just finished Scientific Freedom, The Elixir of Civilization by Donald W. Braben. It's a very good book. It talks about how kind of like the pace of scientific discovery since the 1970s has slowed very drastically due to kind of like a combination of peer review and mandated justification of like spending money and a push for short-term miracles instead of long-term understanding. And so a lot of this book is kind of figuring out how to fund and find transformative research, and one part that kind of particularly stuck out to me is the invention of the laser, which we talked about very briefly yesterday. And I think this is particularly interesting because the guy who invented the laser, Charles Towns, was still pretty junior in his career when he invented it. And he kind of talks about how a lot of his early research was about millimeter level radiation, like microwaves and radar and whatnot. And so a lot of time after his initial work, he was like, can we go smaller effectively? And there was no real need to go smaller. Like at the time, there was no proven benefit to having higher frequency communication at that point. And so for him, it was a purely intellectual pursuit of like, okay, what if we went even smaller than millimeter? And so at some point, he came up with the approach to generate these like photon avalanches to make lasers work, and try to pursue it seriously at his university. But for the life of him, he spent like a year or two or three trying to get it to work, but couldn't make it work. And after he'd been at it for about 2 years with no success, two longtime mentors, Isidore Isaac Rabi and Polycarp Kusch, whose names I hope I didn't butcher, who were the former and current chairman of the department at his local university, both of them which were Nobel laureates for their work with atomic and molecular beams. And so both had a lot of really strong weight in opinion, both just like not only in the scientific world, but within their institution as well. They kind of came into his office, sat him down, and told him like, hey, look, man, your research funding depends on the same research funding as mine. So it would be in all of our best research interest if you called your funny little research off and let us have the funding instead. You know it's not going to work. You should stop wasting your time. Stop. You can do better things with your time. But the thing is, Townsend was already on tenure track at the time at Columbia. So he knew that despite being junior, he couldn't be fired for incompetence or ordered around even by Nobel laureates. Yeah, nonetheless, it must have been really daunting for him because Rabi, who was one of the most influential people in the field, he was a senior member of the MIT Radiation Lab, which at the time was set up by Vannevar Bush to develop wartime radar. Basically, he told him to fuck off and continued. 2 months after that, he had a working maser, which was similar to a laser but at a microwave level. And 2 years after that, his postdoc student moved to Columbia, and in collaboration with them, they invented the first optical laser. And for that, they won a Nobel Prize for it. So I think that's just like a really interesting story about perseverance and trust in your own research taste, which I thought was especially interesting. I know it's probably not relatable for the vast majority of us as we don't have tenure, but a lot of us have the luxury of doing more independent style work where we're not super beholden to any particular institution. If anything, was a fun case example of just someone really just having full conviction in the stuff that they worked on. Yeah, inspiring case study. There's a bunch of really other fun case studies in the book that I'm working my way through, so I'll send you notes when I'm done. But yeah, that's my video.